Suzanne. Welcome to my YouTube video. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to choose hand-dyed yarns for a larger project at the yarn store, and then also, once you get home with the skeins that you purchased, how do you organize them so you don't end up with big color blocks in your garment. So here we have some Alexandra Crafts beautiful hand-dyed yarn, and we're at the yarn store. The first thing we're going to do is just pick out some skeins that we like, and here I have 7 skeins that are gorgeous, but we can see by looking at them right now that there are some differences between the skeins. So the first thing we're going to do is see how big the differences are, and in order to do that we need to actually open the skeins. So we're going to take the tags off. My friend Ron, who owns this yarn store, is helping me. We're at the Twisted Skein, and we're going to open up the skeins and lay them back down so that we can see the full skein. Let's put them across this way. Yeah, it'll fit in the picture better. And then we'll be able to really see the differences between the skeins. It's amazing the little nuances or big nuances that you'll notice once you open the skeins. And this is really the only way you can really see what you're buying. Sometimes inside the skein will be a big color block that you really can't see when the skein is twisted up. Yes, there's one there. We can already see there's some pretty significant differences here. So what we're going to be doing is deciding which skeins we want to buy for our project. In this case, it's going to be a sweater. And these are probably have 400 yards in them at fingering weight. So we'd probably need 4 of these skeins, 5 at the most, to do a cardigan. So we've got 7 to pick from. So we'll have two that we're not going to take home. And we can pretty much tell right now that the one in the center is very different. This one here you can see is very different, and also it looks like, yes, that one's very different. So we're going to just remove it from the choices, and let's slide these in together a little bit. Sorry about moving around. I should use a tripod, but oh well. This one also looks drastically different right here. It has a lot more dark, and so does this one. So we kind of have to decide. Maybe, let's see. I'm thinking actually this one here looks like it's a different color. Really it has less of the greenish blue and more of the bluish blue. Yep, so we're going to remove that one. So now we have 5. Most likely we're going to use 4 for this sweater. So one of them can be the ones that we're going to use for our swatches, and we could also use it for the button bands and collar, because those can have slightly different colors and not stand out so much. So now let's arrange them in order. Let's try to mix them and match. Like these 2 dark ones are together, maybe move one between the light ones, rearrange them a little bit, and try to get them in some order that we would use them in our sweater. So I think this one still looks like an outlier right here, and this might be the one that I'm going to swatch with right here. I'm going to use it for my swatching. And so that leaves us these 4, and they look pretty good in that order. So we've got this darker area here, we've got some darker here, some darker here, some darker here. So if we use them, I would actually put labels on these. I'd say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the order that I'm going to use them when I knit my sweater. And I do label them right at the beginning, because believe me, you will forget halfway through. You probably stop your project for a little break, and then you can't remember where you left off. And once these are wound up into a ball, they look completely different. And they will actually all look very much the same, and it'll be hard for you to tell the difference. So I label them right off and put them into a ball. And I'll be back in just a minute. I'm going to start a swatch with one of these or a different yarn and show you how I mix them in the swatch. Okay, so here I am, and I'm working with a different colorway by Alexandra's Crafts. This is still the same yarn company. I just love her yarns. But these are two completely different balls. And you can see this one has maybe a little bit more of the orange and brown than this one does, and the gray value is a little bit different. It's very slight, but I think you can see that. And that's just the nature of hand-dyed yarn. No two skeins are exactly the same. So don't let that stop you from knitting a sweater with it, because your sweater will be absolutely gorgeous. You just need to learn how to use hand-dyed yarn as I showed previously in this video, how to choose them and to put the colors together so that you kind of blend them. So when I start a garment with hand-dyed yarn, I usually use about half of a ball before I add in the second ball. I'm past that point on this, but just so you can see an example, I don't start both colors at the exact same time, because then you'll run out of both colors at the same time and you'll have a big color shift between these two and the next two balls. So I work with one ball to maybe a third of it or a half of it is used. Then I add in the second ball, and then by the time this one's about half used, this one will be running out, and I'll start the third ball, etc. So they overlap, so you don't have any big color shifts. So I've put a little swatch on here, and I've just got 16 stitches on here, and so I worked a few rows in the first yarn. And you can see here, let me enlarge this a little bit so you can get up close. I added the second yarn in here. This is where I started that tail, and I just started knitting with it. I didn't tie a knot or anything. And the first couple stitches will be loosey-goosey, but you can go back and adjust them later on. The edge stitches here are edge stitches. They're never going to be perfect, even on this side. They're not perfect. The most important stitch is the first one in. This is the edge stitch. This is your first column in, and that's what's going to show on the front of your work, because you're most likely, for a garment, you're going to be seaming or picking up stitches between the first and second stitch. So this edge stitch will actually be concealed after picking up stitches or seaming, and this will be the stitch that you'll see on the front of your work. So because we're working flat, that means we'll rotate yarns every 2 rows. So this yarn, I just worked a right side row and a wrong side row. Now I'm ready to work with this yarn. And the way that you change yarns is you bring this yarn forward to the front. This yarn will come up to the back and you'll start working with it. Now it's really important to notice the last stitch worked in that yarn, and it's right here. Can you see it? I'm moving it. You do not want to pull this yarn tight when you pull it up to work the new row, because what it will do is it'll pull this stitch down to nothing, and when you go to pick up stitches or seam, your stitch count will be off on the edge here, because it will literally disappear and you'll think that there's not a row there. It will appear that way. Trust me, I've done that many times. So I've learned that when I go to pull that yarn up, I need to keep an eye on that stitch and not pull the yarn up so tense that I shrink that stitch down. You can see it's still the normal size there. This yarn's in front. I'm going to get the other end of my working needle, and I just start knitting. So that first stitch, I'm not pulling the yarn tight. You do not want to. You just want to have enough tension to make a stitch. Then you can go to your normal tension with the second stitch, and you work across to the end of the row, turn and come back, and I'm going to do that right now. I'll cut the video and we'll do the edge stitch again. I'll be right back. Okay, so I just went over and came back, and this is the last 2 rows. This is the one I pulled up, so you can see it looks good. Now the next stitch that I'm going to be pulling up is this one right here. We're going to drop this yarn to the front. You always bring it to the front. The yarn you just finished with, the yarn you're going to knit with, comes from the back, and you want to make sure that that stitch is the right size right there. It's worth taking your time to do this. You can't just turn your work and start knitting, because it will be too tight. It'll just disappear. It's right there. That's the stitch right there, and we don't want it disappearing. So we're going to work over and back. The first stitch, you have to watch your tension that you don't pull it up too tight just to tighten that lower stitch, and then you can knit with your normal tension. So this video is in conjunction with a cardigan knit along that I have on Ravelry. It's called It Takes a Guild. There'll be a link down in the description that tells about it. There'll be some other information on how to contact me down there. I have a group on Ravelry. It's called Knitting with Suzanne Bryan, and a group on Facebook called Knitting with Suzanne Bryan. You're welcome to join me in either of those groups. I hope you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I hope you share my videos with your friends. That's how I can share my knitting expertise with other people. I guess there are peoples too. So share my videos. Give me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. And I hope to see you next time. Happy knitting.